When I first acquired this car, it was sitting in a storage unit with the water pump removed. So the first thing I did is have the engine rebuilt because it was leaking oil, and we rebored it 20 thousandths. Standard bore would have been close, but we went 20 thousandths, and the transmission was also rebuilt for the same reason, to solve any oil leaks and freshen everything up. The entire engine bay is complete with the exception of the engine block having been repainted, but the rest of it is all original finishes. So let's go ahead and start it up from a cold start and see how it does. According to the manual, you're supposed to pull the tilt steering column down into the lock position, pump the pedal once, and then turn the key, and let's see what happens. Okay, so all the gauges are working with the exception of the amp gauge, which none of them ever worked. And the battery is probably 10 years old or older, so I would recommend replacing it if you're going to drive the car. But it drives like a new 50-year-old car. Everything's fairly tight for being original. The odometer reads 8,635 miles. I believe that to be probably turned over one time. But everything shifts nice. Oil pressure's good. Temperature gauge is reading cold still because we just started a few minutes ago. Actually, the oil pressure is showing close to 100 pounds PSI. The air conditioning is all hooked up. When I got the car, it did hold Freon, but right now the Freon is gone, so everything does work with the exception that it does not hold the charge. What we have here is a 1968 Mercury Cougar XR7 unrestored original paint car. These cars were built on the assembly line along with Mustangs. They were far from perfect when they were brand new, but this car is documented as to the way these cars were built in the 60s, unlike restored cars, which are someone's version of what the car should have been like. We have a lot of interesting details on the car, such as the original painted pinstripe, and then the car is all original with the exception of this fender was repainted, because when I acquired the car, paint was peeling off of it very badly because this fender had been replaced. And I think there might have been a little bit of paint work on both doors, but the paint looks good. And the reason it looks as good as it does is because I had a paintless repair guy come in and work out all the little door dings that were in the car on both sides. So it looks nice, but there are flaws in the paint. There are little spots here where they were touched up with a little brush, not very noticeable, but the roof, the hood, everything's all original. The hood, the paint is thin on it. When light is right, you can see that the paint is very thin on the hood and does have some touch-up spots there and there, hard to see in the camera, but they are there. If we walk around the car, there are a few blemishes in the moldings. This molding here has a little dent. There's a little dent in the back on the window molding, which are noted in the photo gallery that is included in the auction. The way I acquired this car was in 2005. I found it on eBay It was part of a estate auction. So I am technically the second registered owner of the car. It was sold new in Arizona, just outside of California. That's why it doesn't have smog on the car. But it spent most of its life in California until 1979, when it was put in storage with the water pump removed from it. And so it sat in indoor storage. That's why the paint is so good. This car has a lot of interesting details about it which you don't find on a restored car. There's a lot of original paint marks, inspection marks, both under the hood and under the body. And interesting things about the car too is that when they were built on the assembly line, they were painted with the fenders and the hood off of it so they get in the door jambs good. But the trunk lid was installed on the car, so a lot of areas did not get much paint, like underneath of the door jamb and under the lip of the trunk lid and the lip of the hood, which there are photos of it in the photo gallery. And there is some light surface rust there. And inside the trunk, they were real bad at rusting where they were bolted to the jig that went through the assembly line. This car is about as rust-free as you will ever find in one of these Cougars built in the 60s, because it spent so much of its life either in California or in indoor storage. So it is a well-preserved, original paint car. You probably won't find any nicer car than its original condition. Now moving to the interior. The interior of the car is all original. Door panels, headliner, carpets, console, dash pad, everything except for the seat upholstery, which were reupholstered just like the original seats using soft glove leather, unlike the cheap vinyl that you can buy from the reproduction vendors. It turned out very nicely. Colors were good, the textures were good. So everything inside works. The tilt steering column works. Even the clock works. It still ticks. It doesn't have a quartz movement in it. It's just like the original. So there's a lot of interesting little details about an original car that I'd be happy to point out to the buyer that you usually don't see on a restored car because people just didn't know. The reason I bought this car was because I was restoring a GTE and I was tired of looking at photographs of other people's interpretation of what the car should have been like. I wanted something I could look at and see how the factory actually did build things, including all the ugliness and the poor workmanship that they had on the cars. And so my GT is done now. I love the car, but I don't use it much. But I really enjoy taking it to shows because it being white, I only have to wash it before I leave in the morning. I get there, I park it, I don't dust it, I don't do anything. It looks great. Being white out in the sun, it's bright, you don't even see the flaws in it. It is really enjoyable to have and see what the cars were. If you really want the experience of what the cars were like in the 60s, this is the Cougar that you want.